Okay, so what we've got going on here at the moment is quite a basic system. I've got the what's it called game variable data source taking the right stick values, vertical and horizontal. They have been sent to a data source. For one of the data sources, it's being inverted simply by multiplying it by -1, and then the values for the stick there is used to control these angular motors. Now, these motors control these pivot points here on this machine gun. This allows it to rotate 360 and also aim up and down about 30 degrees of arc. And there is also a firing sound effect, so I'm pressing right bumper, it splits the signal, sends a signal to two states, set state event and effect event. Set state enables a timer so that every 0.016 of a second it plays a sound effect, which is a metal creak pitched up to sound like a machine gun. And then it also plays the afterburner effect, which looks a bit like muzzle flash. Upon releasing the button, it then obviously cancels all of those. So the player has full camera control via the use of this machine gun, which also fires. And then I've got a suspension system set up here, no steering yet, but essentially it's solid axle suspension, two wheels connected to the solid axle suspension, and obviously the solid axle suspension is connected to the truck. Solid axle suspension is indicated by these long wooden poles, which is going to help me reposition these wheels so that they are in the right place, essentially. You can see how I believe this wheel here is too far forwards. This wheel here is about right, so I will have to move that. Now, what I'm essentially going to do with these is obviously add the steering for these wheels. All 6 wheels will be powered via the same system. Essentially, when the player presses the trigger, how hard they press the trigger will affect the throttle. So I will just show off the suspension now. Again, I went with solid axle coil because independent suspension is a lot more fiddly and unstable. So when the truck lands, the weight of the truck bouncing onto the metal grating beneath it forces the suspension to push the vehicle back up. It behaves differently every time. That's the goal there, is to get it to sit nicely in between these two wheel placement guides. And you can see the suspension, apart from it clipping with the wheels at the back here, the suspension is sitting idly, but the wheels at the back are clipping quite badly, so they are wreaking a bit of havoc. There's the driver inside, animated NPC. I will see if I can make this the player in time, but for now I'm just going to show off the machine gun turret. Test track. The truck will do its thing, it will land, it will bounce around, clip with the wheels, and then I control the turret, and I've got fine control over it, so I can move the turret as slowly or as fast as I want. Again, about 30 degrees of arc, up and down, and it fires. At the moment, the afterburner effect only likes to face one direction, so when I fire this way, the afterburner actually goes through the gun, so I have to figure that out. But once I've rigged up all the suspension, I can then sort out the steering, which should be relatively simple to do, and I will have a fully working truck. It's there only once I've got the suspension and the steering sorted out will I then worry about the projectile physics, so whether I want that to actually be a physics-based system or hit scanning. Either way, compared to Maximum Threat, I've quite quickly managed to turn out something that is far more efficient and far higher quality than what I had in Maximum Threat. The APC, the Bearcat 2 in Maximum Threat, lacking working suspension, using sort of pseudo suspension through non-solid joints or non-solid axles, and having a turret that would only move at set speeds. Whereas this, again, this turret, you have complete control over the speed it moves. What's good about Trials Rising is its physics boundary is a lot larger than what was available in Fusion. In Fusion, you only had a physics boundary of about 90 meters, which if you're trying to depict an APC with an anti-tank cannon on it, that fires at 1-to-1 speed, which is about... I think in the end I actually did not put 1-to-1 speed now I think about it. I think I dumbed it down to about 700 meters a second. You've got a round travelling 700 meters a second. After 90 meters, it just stops midair. Whereas this is 600 meters, which means that if I did want to use a ballistic system, it would be far more viable to do it. So I may do that. I may go with hit scanning. It depends on which one is easier and which one is less taxing. Hit scanning is probably going to be less taxing, but might be a lot harder to figure out than a ballistic system, since I already know how to do the ballistic system. Not of course, I don't really have any projectiles in this game. I don't think there's any bullets in this game, so any projectiles small enough, but we will see. Either way, it's quite quickly coming along quite nicely, and very soon I should have a functioning truck, which will be rather fun. Okay, so this is a quite simple system. I spent way too long trying to figure it out. It's really simple. A lot of this is a lot more efficient, obviously, than what I came up with in Maximum Threat back on Trials Fusion. But essentially what it's doing is taking left stick horizontal value, which maxes out at 111 and mins out at minus 111. But it's not actually doing it right now. It seems to be capping out at, oh yeah, 111. It's there somewhere. Point is, that's where it caps out at, minus 111 and plus 111. That's the sensitivity settings on the controller. So that's going to a data source. Essentially, that data source is then feeding a function. The function is dividing that by 3.5 to get a more reasonable value. That will actually indicate the angle at which the steering turns. So once it gets that division, it gives a number to the set score. Sets these different, these 4 different data sets, and that sets the minimum and maximum turn angle of the wheel. So when I pull it all the way, it sets the turn angle maximum to minus 31.71, and then it does the opposite in the other direction. Really simple, really smooth and effective. Mostly stable. I'll have to do a bit of juggling to make sure that it is properly stable, but in the clip you saw just then, well, not really clip, but in the footage I showed at the start, the truck sometimes when hitting terrain at fast speeds the wheels will sort of jiggle a little bit. This is far more stable than any of the other systems I've come up with before, and far more effective. It uses so few actual pieces of programming to make it work, and it works well. So yeah, I just need to make the joints a bit more solid so they don't spaz out so much, and that's probably about it, really. It's mostly smooth. The truck is wobbling a little bit, but again, I just need to adjust the hardness of the joints. So once I've got this streamlined, it is effectively then just finding a way to make this machine gun actually fire. But as for all intents and purposes, the truck is fully working. I now need to add all the funny little detail stuff that I added in Maximum Threat, such as ground impact sound, engine noise, horn maybe, ground effects, so when the vehicle hits the ground at a certain velocity it makes a puff of smoke, and the actual trail that it leaves when it's travelling through the sand, and that will effectively be the truck done. At which point I will simply be able to just apply it into a level. I know how to make landmines, I know how to do vehicle health, I know how to configure NPCs to track the player's position, so I could possibly have enemy armor aiming at the player, dealing damage to the player. All that I already know from Broadsword Maximum Threat. Again, but that's back on Fusion. Never released it because I never got to a point where I was happy to release it, but this is very swiftly getting to a point where it could be good enough to be released, which is nice. That I've done it in three days. Granted, I should be asleep because I have work. I've work technically today, but I got this working. That's what's more important to me. So, but yeah, if I just turn the edit icons back off, so you can see it again working without all the code in the way, or programming, sorry. I do maybe have to use an inversion function, as at the moment the truck is turning the opposite direction to what it should. I also need to figure out how to make it reverse. Again, it should be the same as making it accelerate, except applying a negative value. So that is pretty much, as far as the most important parts go, the truck is done, which is awfully nice. I'll probably put a handbrake in as well, so the handbrake will literally just be that extra button there, that left bumper, and that will just lock the wheels and disable any inputs from the controllers, and then you have to press it again in order to re-enable inputs from the controllers. But yeah, at the moment the truck is turning the wrong way when I use the controller, so I do need to sort that out. I can also now make those rings on the wheels there invisible. That's what's actually attached to the vehicle to make his axles work. Does beautiful backflips, and his suspension, whilst very hard, does work. Navigates over terrain a lot better than the Bearcat did. You can see what I mean about the joints there being a bit wobbly. I might lower its centre of gravity as well, just so it's less prone to rollovers. I might lower its torque. It seems to be very torquey. It gets off the line a bit too quick. So yeah, I might lower its torque a bit as well. Lower its torque, make the speed interpolate, so it actually accelerates rather than instantly reaching its maximum velocity. And solidify the turning joints. But yes, I now have a working truck in Trials Rising. Very happy.